Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Kristin Abello. And we're going to be discussing her amazing memoir, Sunrise, Life After Traumatic Brain Injury, a healing journey in surviving TBI, an empowering true story. The book is available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. But people, listen, there's a couple of other resources that I'm going to need you to check out, okay? First and foremost, head directly to her personal site to gather everything that she has in store, and that's KristinAbello.com. There, you'll find more information on her, more information on this wonderful narrative, as well as find the hyperlink set up to take you to the purchasing page. And in addition to that, she also has an audiobook that's available through Audible. So head on over there as well. If you're like me and, sometimes you're on the road and you can't necessarily read yourself, but you still want to get lost in a journey, and that audiobook definitely will come in handy. So one more time, that's KristinAbello.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, as well as the audiobook that's available for purchase. And I will say, Kristin was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business, Author Reputation Press. So if you or anybody you know have a book that they'd like moved, people, I'm telling you, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give. Contact ARP and have their representatives move it for you. You can find out more information on them and their fantastic team at authorreputationpress.com. And listen, people, it is an absolute pleasure to have Kristin here on the line. Kristin, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Hi, Benji. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored and privileged. Thank you so much.
Well, Kristin, you're too kind. Thank you, and you're very welcome. We're absolutely looking forward to this experience, and we get a lot of potential guests that come to our network and of course, wanting to be involved. And there's only so many people we can allow on the network, but it was a no-brainer. When we got the information for your book, this was something we knew we had to have. I think your story, as I mentioned, as you, of course, know, is one of inspiration. And could we have chosen a better time to really have a story of this magnitude on our network, given what we've all gone through these past few years with the varying degrees of lockdown that we're all still experiencing with this pandemic, the social divide, The political divide? I mean, my goodness, there's enough stress and adversity to go around. So to have a shot of inspiration and one of hope is perfectly timed and so profound. So we are looking forward to this. Now, Kristin, I know we have a lot of information to discuss pertaining to the book, but I want to hold off slightly before jumping in, and I want to start with learning a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Okay, so very nice, very nice. I would love to. Well, I was born in Virginia. I'll start back 48 years ago. I was born in Virginia. My dad was actually in a Ramco Oil business, and so we traveled a lot when I was young. And then we moved to California. Then we ended up in Saudi Arabia for quite some time. Wow. In my younger years. Down Saudi Arabia, and that was we were on an American compound. This is back in the 70s and 80s. And we ended up moving to Houston, Texas, or Katy, Texas, to be exact. And we then, me as a person, went to Taylor High School, had the greatest time, had the greatest friends. We parted, I went to Stephen F. Austin and I attained my Bachelor of Science degree. Mm-hmm. Over at Stephen F. Austin State University, and I am happy to say that after graduation, I ended up back in Houston, and my parents and my family were in Saudi Arabia at the time. And my brother was still in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a lot of traveling and just life experiences.
Kristin, thank you so much for all of that. And listen, we're going to have to invite you back onto the network. My goodness. Not to discuss this book in further detail or any other book that you write in the future, but just to discuss your background, because your traveling experience, I'm sure, has left you with stories for days, and we would love to be a part of it and hear it. But of course, the anchor for today's interview, Kristin, is all about your book, Sunrise. Give us a description of what it entails, please.
Okay, a little about Sunrise. It's a memoir. An inspirational memoir is what it's supposed to be, about traumatic brain injury. I wrote the book for my husband and my family who were going through the hard times and the battles of survival at the time. Not knowing what to expect. I go back and I look, I've researched a lot. Okay, were there any books for my parents or my husband to read? Anything to give them hope? I didn't find any. I found maybe one. And so fast forward, I ended up writing a book in hopes that one day it would become a screenplay, and we will see. So the book is written. It's an inspirational story. It's about my life. It's about overcoming the adversity of traumatic brain injury and surviving and living in today's world.
Chris, the next question that I'd love to get into, I am fascinated by your title. Now, the subtitle hits it right on the nose, okay? There's no beat around the bush. We understand that subtitle and the connection that it has to the narrative itself. But Sunrise, I mean, there's so much, the imagery that comes to mind. When I'm doing research on it, I'm trying to connect that to the story itself. And I have all of these assumptions coming up. But Kristin, you know what happens when you assume. So I'm not going to do that to you. I have you here on the line. Let's go directly to the source. Talk to us about that title, Sunrise, and why you chose it to be the representation for your book.
Right, exactly. Sunrise, after all the many, many titles I came up with. Actually, I think this was one of my first, but then I came up with many, many others. And then I went back to Sunrise because there were so many symbolic meanings to a sunrise. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the sunrise, my accident happened during sunrise. There are many intertwined reasons why sunrise came about.
I love it. And people, that's as far into that description that we're going to go, because now the onus is on you. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, KristinAbello.com are the places you have to go. Sunrise is the title you have to pick up. And, of course, Kristin Abello is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. You know, Kristin, curiosity for myself here with this next one, but what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or maybe highlight is the wrong word, because, of course, given such a traumatic experience, I'm sure there's probably not much positive to the experience outside of the recovery process itself and things, of course, that you learned along the way. But if not a highlight, something that surprised you during this entire journey that you weren't anticipating before you began.
Okay, this is an excellent question. Thanks, Benji. You know, in writing this book, that was my first and foremost, is to let it go out to the people, let it help whoever needs to be helped. But in the end, writing the book helped me. It was a very therapeutic process. However, I never imagined it to be so intense, so deep. And, you know, when people would ask, oh, how are you doing? What are you doing? And I finally, after months on, and I finally opened up and said, I'm actually writing a book about traumatic brain injury and my story, and hopefully it can help people. And, people get excited. Oh, you're writing a book. Oh, you're writing a book. It is great, but it's a very intense process, especially if it's a memoir and it's about your life. So big congratulations to any authors out there, and especially those who have written about their own lives.
Absolutely.
Because you go back to that time. You go back to that time. You relive every single moment again and again. But it's for all the caregivers, all the patients, for them to have hope and resilience through their traumatic brain injury battle.
Kristin, I love what you just said, and for multiple reasons, right? Because I think it's really important how you're pointing out that this is a book also for caregivers. It's not just for the traumatized, right? Now, people, of course, again, she's talking from her experience, and she went through that traumatic experience. So it's very relatable for anybody that can find themselves in similar circumstances. You don't have to have gone through the same traumatic experience, but any type of traumatic experience, you'll be able to find that bridge and relate to her story. But it's also very important for us not to forget about those caregivers, those people that are on the peripheral, right, that haven't gone through the experience themselves, but are dealing with the victims of that experience and how they're juggling everything that's happening. That's a fantastic point and a great segue, because the next point that I wanted to go into briefly, people, this is not the only thing that she's written. Of course, Sunrise, as I mentioned, was the anchor for today's interview, so that's where you want to start. You also got an audiobook, which we mentioned. But in addition to that, she's also written a TBI journal, chock filled with so much valuable information. Kristin, briefly, because we do have a couple of minutes here as we start to close out, can you give us a brief description on your TBI journal?
Okay, I wrote the Sunrise Journal, TBI Sunrise Journal, for the patients, and this is exactly what I did back when my accident happened, and I was finally released to go home from the hospital. I made this journal. It was prayerfully and wholeheartedly created for the TBI community. It's a safe place for a patient or caregiver to go and record their progress. So I did this because I personally did this when I got home from the hospital. It's just inspirational, motivational quotes, and then what specifically the traumatic brain injury patient is doing in their healing process, whether it be OT, PT, speech therapy, equine therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It could be any of it. And then there's space for reflections. It's just something that I did back when my accident took place. And I just made a simple little journal for everyone out there who may need it, for the caregivers and especially for the survivor themselves. And usually when you record process and you look back, you celebrate to yourself or with others about all the mountains you've moved. I mean, that all the positive progress you've made.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just a simple journal, and I'm looking forward to everyone getting a copy of it.
Listen, Kristin said that that's a simple journal. It's anything but, okay? She's just being humble. People, I'm telling you, this is a movement. This is an absolute movement. It starts with her story, but I promise you, you'll be able to take a lot of the information that you receive from this, caregiver or victim alike, and you'll be able to implement this into your day-to-day lives. I am sitting here in absolute amazement because people, this is what we created People of Distinction for, right? It started off as a network for artists, and it has morphed and developed into a thing where we now open it up to the entire human family, of course, artists alike, but everybody. And we firmly believe this. It's not just something we put in the mission statement. We firmly believe that every single person has a unique and distinct voice. Everybody has a story to tell. And we want to give you that microphone to showcase that. And it starts with an amazing memoir like this one. I'm telling you, get your journey going, get lost in it, learn from her experience. You can thank me later. Once more, we're here on the line with Kristin Abello. We finished discussing her book, Sunrise, Life After Traumatic Brain Injury, a healing journey in surviving TBI, an empowering true story. Available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, KristinAbello.com. But make sure you check into the TBI Sunrise Journal, and you also pick up the audio book through Audible. People, this is a wonderful resource to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So you know where to go. Kristin, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you so much, Benji. It's been a complete honor.